The largest single step in the ascent of man is the change from nomad to village agriculture. What made that possible? An act of will by men, surely, but with that, a strange and secret act of nature. At the end of the Ice Age, a hybrid wheat appeared in the Middle East. It happened in many places. A typical one is the ancient oasis of Jericho. Jericho is older than agriculture. The first people that came here and settled by the spring in this otherwise desolate foreground were people who harvested wheat but did not yet know how to plant it. That's an extraordinary piece of foresight. They made sickles, which have survived, out of flint. Garstang found these when he was digging here in the 1930s. The holders in which these were fitted have been found, and so I've reconstructed the kind of sickle with which they went out and found the wild wheat and harvested it. Here it is, the ancient sickle edges set in a modern piece of gazelle horn of the kind that they used, or they used bone. There no longer survives up here on the tell the kind of wild wheat that they harvested. But the grasses that are still here must look very like the wheat that they found, that they gathered for the first time by the fistful and cut with that sawing motion of the sickle that reapers have used for all the 10,000 years since then. That was the Natufian pre-agricultural civilization, and of course it couldn't last. It was on the brink of becoming agriculture, and that's the next thing that happened here on the Jericho Tell. The turning point to the spread of agriculture in the Old World was almost certainly the occurrence of two forms of wheat with a large, full head of seeds. Before 8000 BC, wheat was not the luxuriant plant it is today. It was merely one of many wild grasses that spread throughout the Middle East. The time-lapse film shows 6 weeks of growth of a primitive wild wheat of this kind. By some genetic accident, the wild wheat crossed with a natural goat grass and formed a fertile hybrid. That accident must have happened many times in the springing vegetation that came up after the last ice age. In terms of the genetic machinery that directs growth, it combined the 14 chromosomes of wild wheat with the 14 chromosomes of goat grass and produced Emma with 28 chromosomes. That's what makes Emma so much plumper. The hybrid was able to spread naturally because its seeds are attached to the husk in such a way that they scatter in the wind. For such a hybrid to be fertile is rare, but not unique among plants. But now the story of the rich plant life that followed the Ice Age becomes more surprising. There was a second genetic accident, which may have come about because Emma was already cultivated. Emma crossed with another natural goat grass and produced a still larger hybrid with 42 chromosomes, which is bread wheat. That was improbable enough in itself, and we know now that bread wheat would not have been fertile but for a specific genetic mutation on one chromosome. Yet there is something even stranger. Now we have a beautiful ear of wheat, but one which will never spread in the wind because the ear is too tight to break up, and if I do break it up, why then the chaff flies off and every grain falls exactly where it grew. And just remind you that's quite different from the primitive wheats like Emma. You see, the ear is much more open, and if this ear breaks up, then you get quite a different effect. You get grains which will fly in the wind. The bread wheats have lost that ability. Suddenly, man and the plant have come together. Man has a wheat that he lives by, but the wheat also thinks that man was made for him because only so can it be propagated.